Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Stephen King podcast. Yes, it's been a very long time. You could almost say that we're coming back from the beyond, and the reason for that teaser will be apparent as we get into our main topic of discussion. But today I have with me a longtime podcast co-host, and a real pleasure to be able to do a discussion about my favorite piece of pop culture, and that is Stephen King. And I have with me Karen. Hello, Karen. How are you?
Hello, I'm good.
Great.
How are you?
I am excellent. I'm really pumped to get back into some Stephen King podcasting. Been a while. I've been doing other podcasts, but doing Stephen King podcasts by myself, I always find very hard to do. I'm not a single person podcaster. I tip my hat off to those people that can do that. Just talk by themselves without somebody else to bounce off of, because that is a real talent that I don't possess. So
yeah, I can't do it either. I completely understand.
Yeah. So you were actually on, you probably remember, but it was a while ago. You were on, I think when Bev Vincent was on one episode, you were on as well. So viewers, if you want to find out about that, do a search through the Stephen King podcasts that are up on YouTube. You can find them all on YouTube at Lose Reviews. And yeah, they go back 10 years, over 10 years now. That's scary.
Wow.
And this is episode 113. So not as prolific as some other podcasts, I guess, but still, it's always been fun to do these. And we're going to get a little current here. So we're going to follow the format generally that we used to use. And I just plucked 4 or 5 news items in the recent time frame that have caught my eye, and I just wanted to get Karen's take on them. First up is if you remember a couple of years ago, listeners, there was a documentary done on Pet Sematary, and that was a very deep behind the scenes documentary. Well, now the same filmmaker from that documentary has done a new one, and it's called The Story of It, Pennywise, The Story of It. And I just wanted to give everybody a heads up about that. And this is the miniseries that aired on ABC, and there's a lot of behind the scenes interviews with Tim Curry and other cast members and crew members as well. So that's quite worth watching out. And I'll put links in the show note as to where you can find out about that. So definitely worth checking out because the Pet Sematary one was fantastic, and this one should be just as good as well. Unfortunately, at the time of this recording, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So how about you, Karen? Are you
No, I haven't watched it, but I saw in Stephen King's feed that he was talking about it.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
So yeah, it's something I will have on my to be watched list. Definitely.
Very excellent. Did you ever see the Pet Sematary one?
I didn't. I'll have to go back because those are 2 of his movies that I've seen several times.
Oh, okay. Very cool. All right. So that's the first news item. Next up, and this ties into something we're just talking about, is there is many connections from the Duffer Brothers Stranger Things series to Stephen King, and that tie is even getting stronger because it's been confirmed that they have formed Upside Down Pictures, a new production company that will look at developing other properties once they're done with Stranger Things. And one of those projects is Stephen King and Peter Straub's The Talisman. So that is exciting, and looking forward to seeing what they can do with that, because those 2 guys are obviously very dialed into Stephen King. And if you've watched Stranger Things, that's been quite obvious. And there was a nice Easter egg in the last season with the appearance of the Talisman book in the hospital scene when Maxine's all broken up and lying with all her casts and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to that. How about you, Karen?
Yes, I'm a Peter Straub Stephen King fan, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a Duffer Brothers fan. So this is like my worlds colliding. Stranger Things is definitely like one of my, every time I see it's upcoming, I go right to it. And this season, you and I were talking, this season of Stranger Things was better than last season. It was really firing on all cylinders. And I love that they are big fans of Stephen King. I mean, you can see that they pay homage in overt ways, but I think also in covert ways. They draw from all different sources, and I think Stephen King was a heavy influence for them. So that's cool. I love that. I didn't know that.
Okay, you didn't know that, eh?
I did not.
Ah, interesting. See, that's what I said about judging what the general population knows about various Stephen King projects. So that's cool. So get excited, everyone. That should be good. I don't. The only problem is it's probably a couple of years off. Obviously, they still have to do the final season of Stranger Things, and who knows how long that's going to take, because I think there's going to be a time jump between these.
Yeah, that's what they've said.
So, but hopefully this is something that they can work in between, but we'll have to see.
Have they given any details other than just that's what they're looking at adapting?
I believe they've written the first episode of the series, but that's
it's going to be like a limited series thing, I believe, instead of a movie, which is better.
Yes.
I hate when they adapt a really long book into just one movie. Mm-hmm. I'd rather have it more detail.
Absolutely. Did you know that there's another adaptation of Salem's Lot being done?
I did not.
Oh, all right. Well, that unfortunately is in a more questionable state, because that film was in the can. It's been in the can for a while. It was originally going to come out in this September, but it has been moved back to April 21st, 2023, which is never a good sign. And April is not a good month for this type of movie. So this is pretty disappointing, because there was a teaser release that perked up quite a few ears, and everybody was generally impressed with that. But moving this back to from September to April is not a good sign, and that's disappointing. And this is something that has been frustrating for me as a Stephen King fan, because in this day and age, obviously we have better technology. So all the things that were impossible to do in earlier adaptations of Stephen King works are possible now, even on a TV show budget. You can do so much more now. Like if you watch the 90s version of The Stand, even though the special effects weren't that great, that's a pretty faithful adaptation, and I thought a pretty good one. And then we get the most recent version of The Stand, and it's just a good cast and special effects are pretty good, but the story was just lost in that adaptation. It was very, very disappointing. And when you see things like Salem's Lot being readapted again, and we just had the latest version of Pet Sematary and Firestarter, and it just goes to show you that you can have all the technology and good acting that you can put together, but if you don't have the writing, it doesn't work. And that's the constant in everything. If the writing is not good and you make creative decisions that don't work, in my experience, the more and more I watch things, I feel like there's a lot of good actors out there, and I know people love to play casting who should be casted in this part.
Yeah,
and I get that appeal, but to me, there's just so many good actors that we've had. How many versions of Sherlock Holmes or Batman or Superman? Actors can, any actor, not any, but there's a lot of actors that can fill a role. But how many of those are what you would consider classic versions of those characters? And when they are, it's because of the writing. And so that is the most elusive component to me in a good project, or something that becomes a classic, like a Casablanca or something like that. It's very difficult to pull that off. And we're seeing it with these new adaptations. New technology is great, but if you don't know how to write properly, then it just doesn't work. And obviously with technology, it's a new toy, so people want to play with it. And that's not that kind of stuff that Stephen King writes. His is very character based. So I'm really bummed out about Salem's Lot. I mean, I had hope for Firestarter, but I should know better after what happened with Dark Tower. But yeah, and we'll get to that new Firestarter in another episode, but we're not going to be doing that today. So anyhow, that's bad news on that front.
I am curious to see how different it is from the 79 version of Salem's Lot, because that version, from what I remember, it may not have aged very well. Mm-hmm. Like
it hasn't. It hasn't, but I'll tell you, and maybe it's just nostalgia for me, but the scene with Danny Glick at the window, that scene still works.
Sure.
And they filmed it practically with him on the kid on a boom, and they ran the film backwards. So when you watch it, it's really creepy.
Yeah.
Hey, you should just go on YouTube and just watch that scene because it still works.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean,
Yeah.
you could still watch it. It's just cringy in some parts.
It's like you have to say, okay, this was made in this age, so
Right.
I have to. It's like when you watch the original Star Trek episodes, even though they've had them redone with dated effects and that, but all the scenes, the live action stuff, have to go with it.
Right.
Paper mache boulders and all. So what can you do? But that's it. I mean, yeah, and that what a contrast. And like if you look at the original Star Trek and Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, my jaw just drops every time I watch that show. The sets are so huge, like everything. It's like a Hilton version of the Enterprise. It's unbelievable. The money they spend on that show compared to what they had for budgets back in the day, man, oh man.
Yeah, even comparing it to like the Next Generation.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I'll have to watch the trailer for this. I just found it. So for this 2023
Sounds a lot. Okay.
It needs to be in the fall. I'd rather they push it back
to October.
Till next fall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. All right. But on the good news front, it's another year, and that always means another Stephen King book. And his next book is Fairy Tale, and that is coming out September 6th, and we're getting closer. And when this was announced, it was a bit of a surprise because a lot of us expected King's next book to be Holly Gibney based, which I understand is going to be the book after this. So King always manages to sneak in an extra book here and there, and I guess this is it. And it's just called Fairy Tale. So it's. Are you aware of this, Karen?
I am, and it looks really good from what I read of it. I'm hoping it's really good. I mean, I dig this whole otherworldly feel it looks like it's gonna have. So yeah, I cannot wait.
Yeah, it's a story about a boy and his dog. I love the cover with the spiral staircase going down to what looks like a dragon's eye.
It looks like a dragon's eye. I mean, that's the first thought I had.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's going to tie into that book, and of course it could tie into the Talisman in some aspect as well because of the territories and the King's version of the Upside Down. So I'm just really it just looks like an all-out adventure story, which is a real pleasant surprise. I know he caught a lot of people off guard with the announcement of this book. So, and it's good against evil. Heroic boy and his dog must lead the battle. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, whenever he does a fantasy book, it's so rare that he does anything like this. So I can't wait to read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just going to read the quick little summary here. Charlie Reed, with the E at the end of Reed, looks like a regular high school kid, great at baseball and football, a decent student, but he carries a heavy load. His mom was killed in a hit-and-run accident when he was 10, and grief drove his dad to drink. Charlie learned how to take care of himself and his dad. When Charlie is 17, he meets a dog named Radar and her aging master, Howard Bowditch, a recluse in a big house at the top of a big hill, which with a locked shed in the backyard. Sometimes strange sounds emerge from it. So there's a lot of elements in there that actually, even when we do what our main topic is today, which is Harrigan's Phone, are in this story again. A recluse, an aging recluse, is a common thing that King does. And he's never really, he did Cujo, but that's not the kind of dog story I'm hoping for here. But he's never done one with a dog featured prominently. I think the closest has been Oi as a bumbler in the Dark Tower. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how King handles this. Though he made Cujo sympathetic in the book before it got rabies. So I'm sure he'll do a good job. And of course there was the dog in the stand as well. So I'm looking forward to this. Just looks like a really fun story, and I can't wait to dive into it.
Great.
And it's great that King's doing something fresh. Yeah, September is not that far away now. We're recording on July 24th, so I can hardly wait for that one to come out. So
it's on my want list already.
Yeah. All right. And then the title of today's episode is Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and the movie adaptation is a Netflix production, and it will be coming out. It's been confirmed in the fall sometime. King tweeted that July 18th, but we just don't know when. However, we're looking at the cast, and I was telling Karen before we started this, that when I was reading the story in my head, I had Mr. Harrigan being played by Donald Sutherland, and lo and behold, that's what it turned out to be. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I am loving the cast for this so far. And I think I said to you that Donald Sutherland wouldn't be the body type from what I assumed Mr. Harrigan looked like. But I think it's good casting. I think he's going to be great in that crotchety old man role, but also with a past that you don't expect. So I think he's going to be really good in it. And the casting for Miss Harrigans from the book, she's named Miss Hart in the movie. I can't remember the actress's name, but she's playing the librarian Lucian in The Sandman, and she was a pretty big feature. And I know this is probably not our audience, but in The Good Place, she was a pretty big feature in the last couple of seasons as Simone. And I really like her. She's affable and relatable, I think, and very cool.
Right. Yeah, there's some other notable casting choices as well. So for the lead character, Craig, have Jaden Martell, who of course played Bill Denborough in the recent It adaptation. So that's an interesting choice. I obviously comfortable with that. He's not what I pictured
Craig looking
like, but that'll go away fairly quickly. So
yeah, I'm sure it will.
Yeah. A lot of the other cast members I know, the one that jumps out to me is actually the bully, Kenny Yankovic. It's Cyrus Arnold. I know he's been in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but what I really remember him from is the 2017 second season of the Exorcist TV series, which starred John Chu, Sulu from Star Trek, the new Star Trek movies, and he was really good in that. So, and he's a big dude, so I'm sure he can play a bully quite nicely. So that'll be good, but that'll be a change of pace for him because he's usually played more meek characters.
Nice guys.
Yeah, nice guys characters. So yeah, and it's all looking very promising, and we can hardly wait for that to come out. And I assume because they said the fall that it'll be in October, but no date has been locked down as of yet. So yeah,
it's not even in the worth the wait area of Netflix when you go to the new and upcoming. It's not even in I guess they just don't have a date for it yet. And I am dying to find out when it will come out.
All right. So that is the news. And now we'll turn on to our main event, which is a review of the novella, Mr. Harrigan's Phone. And this was released as part of the If It Bleeds collection, April 21st, 2020. It's one of 4 stories in the book. And the lead story, If It Bleeds, is, of course, the Holly Gibney story, but we're not covering that because Karen hasn't read The Outsiders yet.
No.
Don't want to spoil If It Bleeds if she hasn't read it yet. Anyhow, Mr. Harrigan's Phone is quintessential Stephen King. Small town story, old Maine setting, and the character work in this is, as usual, just blows me away how quickly he can establish all these characters so quickly. It's twist on the monkey's paw, don't you think, Karen?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Like a technologically savvy monkey's paw.
Yeah, exactly. So the gist of this is we have this youngster, Craig, who lives in a small Maine town, and he's hired by a rich old businessman to read and do the odd chore after he retires. After winning some cash off a lottery scratcher gifted by Mr. Harrigan, Craig buys his friend an iPhone. And this iPhone becomes a main component of the story because it gets buried with Mr. Harrigan when he passes away. And though communication continues, it's from beyond the grave. And of course, how that happens is rather chilling at times. So, Karen, what are your overall thoughts of this story?
Well, the first thing I think of when I think of the story overall is that it's Poe-esque. It's creepy, but it's not such a horror story. You read it and you think, okay, that's weird. That's really weird. That's super weird. That's getting weirder. And then there are times of sorrow in the story as well. And so it really puts me in the mind of a classic Edgar Allan Poe story.
Yeah.
And that I like that sort of thing, a thinker. And it was 88 pages long. And to say in 88 pages that he can make you feel these things, it's stunning, I think.
Yeah, I especially his portrayal of Mr. Harrigan, and this might be because King he's getting up there in the age himself, but I think he really captures the essence of that character so quickly by showing that he's a hard ass, but he's a fair hard ass as long as you don't get in his way.
Right.
So if he takes a shine to you, then you're very fortunate. But if he doesn't, as we see in the story, boy oh boy, he can make your life miserable.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and I like how they establish that by telling the story of the man who crossed him in the past, and then he ruined his life. And they do establish also that he takes care of the people that he cares for.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a pretty cool, and I'm going to use my 10-cent word, dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, I like how this one is really deftly crafted in that there's elements of the story that are put in at the beginning, and you get payoffs for them later on. That at the time you didn't. I didn't even think about that anymore. But yeah, that totally works. And like you just mentioned, the thing with the gardener, the original gardener who stole from him, and Harrigan went out of his way to not just run him out of the town, but basically the state and maybe the country for all I know.
Exactly.
So you don't want to mess around with this guy. And I think it's interesting. If there's one thing that I think King doesn't do as well as the other areas of his writing is technology. His whole thing with the iPhone is okay, it's a hand wavy thing, but his perspective on the internet, I always get a chuckle out of it, because it is true that we've grown up now with a generation that expects everything to be free. And Harrigan's initial reaction when he gets his iPhone and that he can call up all the stuff and there's no ads or anything, or paywall, it's quite funny. So I
like that.
Yeah, because I know how annoying I get it when I go to a site where I want to read their article and he says, "Oh, you have to subscribe."
Are you a subscriber?
Yeah.
Log in.
No. And
right.
Or if you use ad blocker, please disable your ad blocker. And it's like.
Yeah, and then you think, well, that's rude of me because they're not making any money if I just watch it.
Yeah. So that from that perspective, I think it's true that we've created a mindset of entitlement, which if you're on social media, boy oh boy, that runs really rampant.
It does.
People demanding creators do this, or why aren't you giving us an update, or when is this releasing, why did you do this sucks. Everything is either a 0 or 100. There's no in between. So this is like the mindset that the internet has created. And King is like 10 years older than me, so he's had extra decade of pre-internet life to really sit back and look at this. So that's an element of the story that's more of a flavor thing, because it doesn't really affect the flow of the story, but or the events. But I just enjoyed it from that perspective, hearing from a person talking about the internet in that way, because I think it's not anything that anybody would argue against.
No, I do think that the fact that Mr. Harrigan picks up on that, it shows how savvy he is in business.
Right, even though he's from it adds flavor to that his character for sure, because he's from obviously a previous generation, but he quickly grasps the implications of what this iPhone and its instant access to everything means in the business world. So yeah, that was pretty good. I quite enjoyed that. So the easiest way to do this is, as usual, we've talked about Harrigan, because to me he's the most interesting character in the book.
Yeah.
Craig is okay. He's not one of the most lovable protagonists that King's written, but
agreed.
He's a little vanilla, I guess.
And I don't think he's meant to be the main character, to be honest.
No. Yeah.
I do like him when he's in his 20s in the book.
Yeah.
He seems like I can understand that version of him, but the younger version of him, I don't connect, except for the reading. Yeah. I read very young as well.
Yeah.
I had my babysitter used to call her friends over to have me read the newspaper to them as like a dog and pony show type thing. So I understand the reading at a young age thing. But I still didn't relate to him very well.
Yeah, he's just like you said. I don't think he's really the focus of the story. He's more a sounding board for the reader. I think as a from that perspective. But the fact that he's willing to, like, there's an innate goodness in this character, but the fact that he's willing to use that phone to do the things that we think happen is, I think that's just showing the alluring but bad side of technology. It's the apple in the Garden of Eden, right? So
right,
you don't want to use it, but the temptation is just too strong. So yeah.
I think it didn't start out that way, which makes it a little better.
Mm-hmm.
It started out that he didn't know where to turn, and he wanted to talk to his friend.
Yeah.
And so he picks up the phone, and there are apps like that where someone, if they know they're dying, they can record a bunch of messages, and you can call them, and you get these messages through the years, which is not the same, obviously, but I think it's not something out of the realm of possibility that someone would call a loved one's phone after they're dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and King plays with those concepts of a phone from the dead, getting a phone call or a message from the dead. He doesn't often explain in great detail how these things could be possible, or like if 11/22/63 is probably the best example, where there's a time portal in the pantry of this diner, and I think another writer would try to over explain that. King just says it's there, it does what it does, and you like it or not, so you just you go along for the ride. And I was a little surprised how he tried to explain how this iPhone could possibly do this. And I'd never checked to verify that these stories about early generations of iPhones had these weird behavior characteristics where they would lock up or whatnot, depending on certain key presses or not. It sounded good.
Right.
And I really, to be honest, don't want to know. I just want to believe that, that's those stories are probably true. And you do get those kind of stories with new things, right? So sure. So that I thought that was cool. I was really curious, though. I don't know how you took it, that the messages that Craig did get from Harrigan from Beyond the Grave were like pretty cryptic, and I appreciated that, but I was also frustrated.
Right. Well, from what I see, Stephen King has explained some of those. Mm-hmm. That the last one is definitely stop.
Yeah.
Craig stop. And then there's other theories that the first one, he says no need to water the houseplants, which I think is interesting. But then he says CCCAA. And from the theories, the most plausible one that I come down to is ask anything. Okay. And then the second one, as he's leaving the message, Craig says knock on the door or knock on the wall if you're doing these things. Mm-hmm. And the first three letters are AAA. Yeah. And the theory that people have bandied about is that that's him knocking. Mm-hmm. AAA Craig.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what the X is.
Yeah.
Is that a kiss? Or...
Hugs and kisses?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and really what King's doing here, like, this could easily be a short story. As well, but Stephen King is Stephen King, so if he wants to write a longer version of this story and get it published, that's going to happen, because we're all going to read it. For me, the joy of just the world that he builds up, the characters, Craig's father, the gardener, the housekeeper, even though they're not in it much, his schoolmates, the teacher that he has a crush on, that all just adds to the flavor. And again, I just come back to, why don't I really like this character that much? Which is unusual, because King's protagonists are usually you're very empathetic and sympathetic towards him. And I guess I am, but there's a hardness in this character, which I think is similar to Mr. Harrigan. And it seems to be intentional. So, and maybe it's because they were kindred spirits, and I'm saying in quote spirits, is why this connection exists between the two of them to begin with. So,
yeah, that Mr. Harrigan saw something of himself in Craig.
Yeah, kindred spirits. Yeah.
I have a question for you on that regard, as long as we're talking about the characters. Mm-hmm. They never said what Craig's dad's name is, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I was looking back through and I was like, what's his name? So it's just Craig's dad.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Now you got me with my pants down.
I looked everywhere for it.
Okay,
I searched Google. I looked on Reddit. I read back through the book again.
Yeah. So that didn't stand out to me, and that's not an important detail.
It's not.
What surprised me when I read this story, and though I should have expected it from King, is it's set up as a bully story, and that played out exactly the way I thought it. But what really got me was the death of the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That threw me for a bit of a curveball.
Same.
And it was.
I actually said to myself in my head, he didn't just do that, did he? It made me very sad.
Yeah, because this was Harrigan. No, what was her name? Harrigan. She's there basically through Craig's school arc, and starting with public school and starting with public school and moving into high school.
Yeah.
Yep. So that whole arc was really poignant because he had a crush on her, and then later on, and this is where this is fiction, I think, and maybe there's kids that are that mature, but for him to move from crush to being friends from public to high school, I found that hard. To me, that wouldn't happen until he was out of high school,
but
a little more mature. But
I think some of that came from the fact that she helped him when he was beaten up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. It's
when you're like, and I think that's a writer from a different age group writing about a younger age group, because now during the high school now it's all hormones and everything. Yep. And I don't think you can become that mature that quickly, but maybe but for no nonsense types of people, I guess that's possible. And he already had an older friend. Yeah.
So I think he was more conditioned to be like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Kind of weird though. I gotta agree.
But it's a story, so you just go with it. And it made the revelation of what happens to her even that more poignant. So that was the part of the story that makes it really stick for me. I mean, besides the Mr. Harrigan's character, it was the death of the teacher, which really stuck with me, and why I like this story. It's a very old school horror story, and it's quintessential King, I think. So it's got elements of it in it. So like he's bordering from a lot of other things. The other element that really got to me was the fact that Craig might inadvertently causing harm to Mr. Harrigan or his spirit or whatever, or making him hang around as long as that phone was still around.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and there's even a part where like he calls to check on him and the phone doesn't pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on he calls again because he has something to say. Yeah. And it's like Mr. Harrigan consents that he's needed by Craig. I thought that was an interesting beat in the story.
Yeah. And I like the open-endedness of the final message too, where like you said, that we're both pretty sure he was telling Craig to stop. But was he telling him to stop for himself or for Craig?
Or for Craig, yeah.
Or for both.
Right.
Because if he's used it twice now, is every time something happens in the world that he doesn't like, is he going to go back to it again? So I like that struggle, because it's that old chestnut, with great power comes great responsibility. Yep. so there's that element of it too, right? So I quite enjoyed that.
And I think one of the saving graces about Craig is that he does decide to throw the phone in the river at the end.
Yep.
And say, thanks, Mr. Harrigan, for what you've done, but I agree, it's time to stop.
Yeah. And I also like the fact that he couldn't transfer that ability to his new iPhone either.
Right.
So that was good. Otherwise, it would have been like
he could have used it any time.
Yeah, he could have still called it back up. So it's a solid good story. I'm glad that you picked it, and it gave me a chance to reread it. And I just forget how sometimes when you go away from something for a while, because I haven't really read anything from King since his last book came out, and it's been a while now. So just to dive back in and enjoy his language and his New England no-nonsense prose of getting at the heart of things, and yet still doing it in an elegant and poetic way. It's just an amazing I'm hopelessly smitten with his writing. I guess because when I read these stories, I don't feel like I'm reading. I feel like I'm sitting around a campfire and somebody's telling me a tale, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I love about his stuff. So
this is definitely a kind of a campfire story type thing.
Yeah.
And then he had a hook.
Yeah, hook. I was thinking the same thing. And the hook was on the door handle.
Oh my God. So can we talk about some of the side characters? I mean, we don't have to go into detail, but
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Charles Chick Rafferty, his lawyer, I thought he was cool, even though he was only in it for a little bit. He and Craig's dad seemed to be kindred spirits.
Yeah.
They were joking around, and I mean, literally, he was in it for maybe 10 pages, maybe, if that.
Yeah.
But he's stuck in my mind as a really good character. Even Reverend Mooney was a character. And I like that Craig went to him when he was first feeling torn about Kenny Yanko's death.
Yeah.
And he said, should I be feeling happy about this? And I don't know that he absolved him 100%, but he said, you're human. And that's what happens. When someone you don't like dies, you can't help but feel glad about it.
Yeah.
And for God's sakes, Kenny Yanko, how much could you hate that kid?
Yeah, he was stereotypical.
From the get-go. Shine my shoes or you'll regret it. I mean, just a stereotypical bully, definitely.
Yeah.
And even when it comes down to like Mrs. G, the housekeeper,
I
like the conversation that Craig had with the housekeeper after Mr. Harrigan's death.
Oatmeal cookies gets his gears moving.
And that was, you could tell that even though she wasn't a big part of the story with Craig, and also Pete, the new gardener, that they were close, even though they weren't in the main story, because of that conversation that he had, and the fact that Pete hired him to help with the gardening after Mr. Harrigan. So you could tell they were close without him saying they're close. Which is something I really like about his books. Yeah.
And I also like the passing reference that Craig made about his mother who had passed away.
Oh,
10. Yeah. There's things that moms can do with kids that dads can't do. So that's probably another reason why he's a little standoffish as well, right? Because
he lost his mom at such a young age.
Yeah. So
that memory that he had was sweet of them taking a walk and holding hands and stuff.
Yeah.
I liked Craig's friends too.
Yeah. Again, they didn't have a big part in the story, but they filled out his world. So I think the quintessential thing that King does here is the small town life of the people in it. All the stories that arose about how Yankovic killed himself, or that small town gossip stuff is it's right in there. So King was just pulling all the chestnuts out of his tool bag.
And I still don't know whether that was exactly how he died, right? I mean, because we get so many stories. I'm assuming that last one where he hanged himself was, especially with the hair detail. Yeah.
The other one, the drunk driver one, that was, that whole suicide scenario thing was kind of weird with the soap, like.
I guess, like, what does that have to do with anything that he put soap in his mouth?
Well, I guess that we're supposed to believe that Harrigan shoved the soap down his throat, right? But first he made him drink his shampoo. So that was interesting. But just overall, just a real fun story to read.
I don't know that I'd say it's fun, but good.
Well, good, yeah. It made you feel something, which is the best what you would hope for when you read a story. So.
And all the characters are there.
Yeah.
I cannot repeat it enough. Character work is so important in books and movies and TV shows and whatever media. And Absolutely. So to get so many characters that you understand immediately, it's talent, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I think that's everything I had for this one. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that hasn't been mentioned? Or
I think that's
no?
everything.
Well, it's been a blast having you on, Karen. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll do some more in the future.
Yes, please.
Yes.
I'm in.
So, all right. So I don't know if we want to decide right now what we want to do next. Did you want to watch the new Firestarter, or
I could do that.
Yeah, and then we could do that in a couple of weeks and just try to keep the ball rolling and get this podcast back up and resuscitated.
Sure. Be happy to do that.
Okay, fantastic. So everybody out there, please send your comments and feedback and suggestions, questions, anything you can think of to the podcast. We'll be happy to get it. You can find the podcast in video form on YouTube at Lose Reviews. There's a Stephen King playlist. I've got all the other 112 episodes up there. So if you're new to the podcast, you can go back. Many of them are still relevant. Of course, some of them might be a little dated, but the work is there. Our opinions of the work hasn't changed that much. And there's some pretty cool guests there too as well. So Stephen King related guests. Please check them out. And until next time, I want to say thanks again, Karen.
And you are most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Take care. And to all our listeners out there, stay safe, but stay scared. The end. Bool.
Scene.
And scene.